Hello, this is Dread from Epoch Builds, and in today's video topic, we're going over Infernal Shade, Ignite Hungering Souls, 400 Corruption, T4 Jurla Farmer Lich. Wait, Dread, I was under the impression that Hungering Souls sucked. Well, things change. Ignite Hungering Souls does a large amount of single target damage. Even with my intentionally gimped setup, we are still hitting 600k ticks on the dummy. That is a lot of damage for Ignite, and I was getting well over 1 million ticks before I had to make some changes for the build so that we can enforce some quality of life. The problem with Hungering Souls Single Soul, it does an insane amount of damage, but it can only hit one mob per skull. This leads to an absolutely atrocious clear with the ability, and was one of the main reasons why a Hungering Souls only build has been not really worth it. So that's where Infernal Shade comes in. Infernal Shade was regarded as one of the worst abilities in the game. Well, we can now relieve the skill of that responsibility and give it back to Tempest Strike, as Infernal Shade is now great, with some investment, of course. As you can see in the footage, it becomes usable, especially thanks to all the global more damage modifiers that Lich has access to. So, we are scaling the spell damage over time of Infernal Shade and the Ignite from Hungering Souls? Wait, what? Yes, you are viewing one of the first of its kind, a hybrid spell plus Ignite build. Who would have thought that this is where it starts, huh? So the idea is, Hungering Souls does so much obscene damage that as long as we can scale both it and Infernal Shade at the same time, which we do, we can clear trash mobs and leave rares for Hungering Souls to kill. We are running a Dragon Staff, which gives us a bunch of flat adaptive damage, which does absolutely nothing for Ignite DPS, but it makes our Infernal Shade do enough damage to clear trash, which is, of course, way more important. Since Infernal Shade is a fire damage over time spell, and Ignite is fire damage over time, it means one of the best affixes at our disposal is elemental damage over time, which of course is available on a staff, which is on my Dragon Staff. This allows Infernal Shade to squeeze just enough damage to do 400 corruption, and breeze through 300 like it's nothing, which is amazing for a skill as meh as Infernal Shade. We also introduced a different way of applying Infernal Shade, as you can see in the footage. So we are casting a volatile zombie. It will then die and apply Infernal Shade to the nearest enemy. Why is this important? Multiple reasons. First off, Infernal Shade, much like Dread Shade, has some of the worst targeting in the entire game. It is so bad. It will always prioritize the nearest enemy to you, even if that same enemy has already an Infernal Shade on it. This is problematic, as if you're trying to cast 2 Infernal Shades to clear it back, because they can shotgun if enemies are in the AoEs, it means you will just end up fizzing the spell. Thankfully, self-cast isn't our only option. The second reason we're using Zombie is, of course, for Hungering Souls. Hungering Souls has some of the largest amounts of more damage modifiers in the entire game, but at a cost. To do the most damage, you require to have 3 minions out, and only 3 minions out. No more, no less. This is obviously insanely annoying at times, but thanks to mechanics of summoning vanguards on zombie death, as long as we have 3 zombies die, we will always have at least 3 vanguards out, which is perfect for single target. And of course, since we have a max of 3 vanguards, we never have to worry about summoning too many vanguards. And while we're clearing, we'll be summoning zombies and have vanguards out, but Infernal Shade doesn't need an obscene amount of damage to kill things in monoliths. It just needs that damage for single target, which is great. Now, it can be a little clunky at times, like I said, but it's all well worth it, as juggling some summoned skeletons into a non-minion build can be painful, and it's much better to go this route than to just use summoned skeletons. So I'm all for automation for this setup. With all of this, we have officially made the first Ignite / spell damage hybrid build I've seen. That is actually good. And made a new Ignite build, and also made 2 of the most overlooked Acolyte skills into a competitive archetype that is actually better in some aspects to the meta Lich builds, specifically Necrotic Lich This build has significantly more single target than Necrotic Lich, but of course Necrotic Lich has access to Spirit Plague, which is like one of the best clear speed skills in the entire game, but nonetheless, having more single target is cool. With all that being said, if you enjoyed the video and want to see more of this, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, as that's the best way of being notified of new uploads, and also, it's the best way to support my efforts here at Epoch Builds. Let's get in game, shall we? Alright, here we are in game with the build. So the skill rotation on the dummy for monolith gameplay, we're just simply going to drop an Infernal Shade, and of course it will apply Infernal Shade. Now 14k, that doesn't seem that much, but once we're in the monolith and we have Death Seal and Reaper Form set up, we actually end up doing more like 32k per second, which is plenty for clearing the monolith because Infernal Shade is deceptive. Infernal Shade is one of the only dot skills that triggers 3 times per second instead of just the normal 2. So most dot skills, like Ignite for instance, triggers 2 times per second, while the dot from Infernal Shade triggers 3 times per second. And it's very, very hard to understand that because like it's hard to tell. But as you can tell here, 1, 2, 3 times per second, and it's actually doing like it's doing way more damage than you think it does. It's just doing it in a different increment, which is why it's so awkward. And then for single target here, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we have 3 vanguards out by summoning some volatile zombies here, as you can tell. And then we're going to go into Reaper Form, go into Death Seal, and then start casting. And as you can tell, the damage ramps up very quickly. Get up to like 600, 700k ticks. Now we can have way more than this if I really cared, if we had something like a Calamity on our helm, if we had a better cast speed stuff. Like there's so many other ways you could make the Ignite do so much more damage that it's fine. 600k is enough to clear the entire game. If you want to go overkill, you can, but I like to make sure that my clear build, my clear skill actually does damage. But yeah, pretty much that's the skill rotation. All right, for the first skill we're going to be talking about Infernal Shade. So we take 3 points into Influence because we want as much AoE as possible, because if a mob and another mob are sitting right next to each other, they will deal each other's Infernal Shade damage to them, and it will shotgun enemies. So we want our Infernal Shade AoE to be as big as possible. And we have to actually grab some nodes to reduce the AoE so that we can actually deal damage. So we want as much AoE as possible. So that's why we take 3 points into Fanning the Flame. Not only do we get AoE, we also get more damage, but this also does hike up the cost of Infernal Shade. But thankfully, Zombie casts Infernal Shade at 50% of the mana cost, which saves the build entirely, which is nice. So yeah, more damage, increase AoE. Then 3 points travel into Cackling Flames. Turns out duration doesn't really matter. We actually have 5 points into the reduced duration in Wildfires, but since Infernal Shade is like killing things in 1 tick or 2 ticks, we don't really care, and it kind of just propagates through the pack, like kind of spreads through the pack, and it's fine. 4 points in Shifting Doom. This is very important because we want the chance to reattach. So when it kills something, it reattach, 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 reattach until it kills everything. And this is how we kill all those spider packs, how we kill all those annoying stuff. Because what happens is we'll cast our Hungering Souls, and they will get stolen by like trash mobs. So this clears the trash mobs so that our Hungering Souls attacks the big tanky targets like rares and stuff, which is very important. Then 3 points on Heart of Fire. I found this is the perfect amount for the perfect amount of AoE, as you can tell here. That right there is plenty of AoE. That's all you need. That's like pretty much everything you need. So having 3 points in this, you don't want to go more, because otherwise you're gonna make the AoE so small that it's hard to tell it even exists. So that's perfect. And of course, the 60% more damage is amazing. Then 5 points in Wildfires. Like I said, the duration doesn't matter because we're constantly reapplying it, and it's spreading throughout packs, so it doesn't really matter like all that much. So that's why we're grabbing these nodes here. For the next skill that's important is Hungering Souls. So we take 1 point travel into Necrotic Pact, and none of that matters. It's travel. Isolation. This makes it so the the Hungering Soul is much bigger. That doesn't really matter. It does look sick as fuck though, so that's all that matters, right? Then 1 point travel into Great Soul. Same thing. More size, hit damage. Doesn't matter to us at all. The mana cost is a little annoying, but we just have to deal with it. Then 1 point into Fire Skull. This is important because it makes the base possess that Ignite Hungering Souls does into an Ignite, which means it has a 100% chance to ignite at base, and then it turns the skill into fire so that it works with stuff that like gives us fire damage with like Ignite with fire skills, like for instance, specifically probably Calamity, something like that. Now, Soulfire works for Necrotic and Ignite fire skills, so that doesn't really matter technically. But yeah, this is very important for later. Then 5 points into Eternal Pyre for Ignite effect and duration. This is the whole reason it's doing any sorts of damage with Ignite. Absolutely insane node. Like, just triples your damage right off the bat. And it's insane. Then 3 points into Gravebound. I only have so many points in Hungering Souls, so if you can manage to get another plus point, you can probably add it into here, and of course into Descent of Madness as well. So this global more damage does apply to the ignites, by the way. Same thing with Unholy Trinity. So we require to have 3 minions exactly. So here, since we have Skeleton Vanguards, and they actually just since you can only have 3, you will always have 3 since you're always constantly summoning them from zombie. Like I said, there is that split second where zombies alive, but they die pretty quickly, so it doesn't really hurt your DPS that much. So that's really strong for the ignites as well. 1 point travel and inspired hunger. We don't want to grab Soul Swarm because it adds mana to the skill for no reason, because we want to get as much minus mana cost as possible, because Hungering Soul is really expensive later on when we're trying to spam it. Then 1 point into the Rising Cemetery. This does nothing. Travel. 4 out of 5 points in the Descent of Madness. This is applying to the damage over time that Hungering Souls is applying, i.e. the Ignite, which is important for us. Then 3 points in the Dominion on Death. The reason why I care about this minus mana cost is we actually do not have a minus mana cost staff. If we had a -3 mana cost mana regen staff instead of a dragon staff, we actually could dump these nodes, and we could go for more damage. I believe. Although I really like the minus mana cost, because I really find on sometimes when you have a bunch of cast speed and stuff, when you're scaling it and you're on a single target, you tend to run out of mana sometimes. So just kind of having that minus mana cost makes it so instead of running out of mana constantly, you're fine, because we need a lot of mana regen to keep up the loop of the Infernal Shade setup. As you can tell here, I have like 20 mana regenerated per second, which is just barely enough to make the build feel good enough for endgame, which is sad, but it's just how it is. Now we have the stereotypical setup of Death Seal with the Hungering Soul setup with the Hungering Souls frequency. That's pretty important. You get Summoned Skulls. We get the more damage. Well, increased damage from Corrupted Consciousness when we're at low life. Same thing with Desperate Shroud. This is a lot of increased flat armor on top of the flat armor we get from that as well. It allows us to scale armor, actually. Then 1 point to Deadlock, of course, so that we're locked at 33% every single time, so that we deal the most amount of damage as possible, because we're a low life build. That's pretty much it for Death Seal. Reperform, the most important stuff here is mainly getting Mark for Death. We actually do not have Fire Shred. That's because we have an Atrophies, which is 25 negative. And then, of course, Mark for Death, which is, I think, is 25 negative. So we're already at 50%. And Fire Shred would be another 40% on top of that on bosses, but we actually don't hit enough to get max stacks of Fire Shred on a boss, so it's just better to go for Mark for Death and for Atrophies instead of going for Fire Shred, and that's why we get it here. This is like guaranteed Mark for Death on a boss. Then we have stuff like Unholy Dominion so that we can move through the monolith quicker with our Reap and our Transplant. We also have 3 points into Mistress of Decay. I feel like 3 points is enough. It makes it so the health drain isn't ridiculous on Reperform, so we actually stay in it for a long time. 4 points in the Soul Shroud. We actually want to build up as much intelligence as we possibly can that is convenient, because the more armor we get, the tankier we are in monos, and this allows us to have a bunch of flat to scale with our Throne of Ambition, which I don't have on because I'm sharing it with multiple characters right now. I'm sure you can feel the pain on that. Then 1 point travel in a Soul for a Soul, 2 points travel in a Reaper's Curse, 2 points in a Death Comes Quickly. This is really good for mono clearing. We get a lot of movement speed, just 10% increased movement speed. That's great. Then 3 points in a Rapid Destruction. This makes it so when we Reperform, we cast a lot faster. That not only helps the quality of life, it also makes it so that when we're summoning around the monolith here, like it doesn't take long to actually cast a zombie, which makes it feel way better. And for the last skill here, we're going to talk about Volatile Zombie. So the most important part about Volatile Zombie is we grab the 5 points into Effigy of Combustion, so that when he dies, he's cast an Infernal Shade nearby him. And then we also have Shepherd of Thralls, which is very important because we want to summon a skeleton vanguard on death, and that means that we always have 3 vanguards. Very important for Infernal Shade. I mean, for Hungering Souls. Then we also grabbed 4 out of 5 points out of Forceful Commander. I want to eventually get 5 out of 5 points for the mana efficiency. Then we have 2 points into Pull of the Grave for the coal. The coal's nice, 16%. That's great. That's a large amount. Makes our bossing much quicker. If you see the boss is almost alive and you don't want to like kill him, just send a zombie his way and he just instantly dies, and it's amazing. That's pretty much it for the skills. All right, for passives here, stereotypical setup for passives: intelligence, because we want the armor and the minion health for our skeleton vanguards so they don't instantly die. 8 points in soul and vitality. We like the increased minion health. The vitality is great for us as well. We're always constantly casting a minion skill, so the increased cast speed from this is amazing. Then 8 points into hunger, because we want even more cast speed, because we actually don't scale cast speed on our gear much at all. So having it from the tree is amazing. 1 point travel to Grave Thorns, 1 point travel to Blood Armor, then 8 points in the Mortal Tether. We want as much minion health as possible so that when our vanguards are on a boss, they don't instantly get gibbed. These guys can survive Rae, like big punch at like 400 corruption, which is like plenty good for me, pretty much. That's pretty much it for Necromancer. Now for Lich, 10 points on Apocrypha. The intelligence is great. More flat HP for your minions. Gives you more armor, increased damage. It also, I like the mana regen as well. You want as much mana regen as possible with this build. 8 points into Dance with Death. Just easy 120% increased damage while alive. 4 points travel into Bed of Souls, although the vitality is great. 8 points into Crippling Insight, like I said, even more increased armor. Even more armor, more flat HP for minions. 1 point travel into 3 Plagues, 5 points into Contagion Engine. This is only up for an Infernal Shade, which is where our damage actually matters, because Infernal Shade doesn't do enough damage at base, so we have to overkill the damage to work on clear. Then 5 points into Deathbringer. Cast speed's amazing for our ignites, and also just feels great. 10 points in Necrotic Energy. We are actually running this flat. This does bring our Infernal Shade flat from like 24k to 32k. This is very important because we only have like 100 flat with our staff, and this brings us up to 120. So this is great. That's why we focus more on damage over time than elemental damage over time per se, and spell damage, but we mainly want to focus on damage over time and then elemental damage over time, and of course intelligence. 10 points in Elixir of Death, really strong node, just gives us 50% less damage, physical damage taken. Great for the monoliths. 5 points into Soul of Ma for the leech. This allows us to leech from the Infernal Shade damage and also from the Ignite damage. Gives us all the leech in the world. Don't have to worry about anything. 8 points in the Corrosive Consciousness. This applies to the Infernal Shade and the Hungering Souls, kind of. So like it's a really great node. And that's pretty much it for this passives. And then for the gearing, this is the fun part. I have a +3 to Hungering Souls on my helm. You don't technically need +3. You could get away with 24. You just have to get rid of this mana cost stuff and get like rid of like 1 damage node on an Eternal Pyre. But this is great. So I like this spell damage here, because there's a lot of spell damage, and this will apply to the Infernal Shade. It will not apply to the Ignite, but it will apply to the Infernal Shade, and like I said, that's where we care. The fire damage applies to both, though, which is cool. We'd obviously want Endurance, HP, but this is like mainly what you want. Your prefixes are more important on your helmet. Now, eventually, if you get a +3 to Hungering Souls Calamity, that would be absolutely amazing for single target. Be your best in slot. Amulet, LE damage over time, either minion health or mana regen, either one, mainly minion health. We want at least like 400% minion health. I found that to be the best like quality of life for your vanguards, because you don't want them constantly dying, right? So I found 400% to be good enough. Then res HP for LT. This is like one of the best amulets I've ever crafted, and it was crafted on stream. I love it. Dragon Staff here. I had this laying around. LE dot, fire damage, and then ignite. Those are the most important stuff. You could turn that fire damage into damage over time, and that will apply to the necrotic part of Infernal Shade from that 20 necrotic damage, and also apply to the elemental part of the Infernal Shade. So damage over time would technically be better than this. You could go for cast speed as well if you are crazy and want to deal as much single target with the Hungering Souls as possible, and you don't really care about your Infernal Shade clear. But I was trying to get my Infernal Shade to do as much damage as possible. Obviously, this is not a well-rolled staff. You get much better. I just went with whatever had Ignite on the stash. Like, this is like the best. Like, this is the best all-rounder staff I could find. Chest, Titan Heart, one of the best Titan Hearts I've ever had. You don't need it. You could just go with HP. Titan Heart is great. Even a base Titan Heart, even without that HP, like I can show you, is great, because we are running a two-handed melee weapon thanks to the melee physical here, and it makes up for the fact that we're not utilizing a shield. As you can tell, it's only like 300 health. It's like actually not that much. So just running a Titan Heart's fine, right? Running a Titan's Heart fine. I just got a really good Titan Heart for once, which is amazing. And then for the ring, mana regen, you want as much mana regen as humanly possible. It just makes your build feel so much better. LE damage over time, minion health, intelligence. It's like around what you want on your prefixes. Crit avoid, HP, resistances. Same thing on the other ring, LE damage over time, mana regen, res. That health regen is kind of worthless, but it's like whatever. Oh, I'm 34%. Oh, you do not want crit avoid. I forgot. Fiery Dragon Shoes. Fiery Dragon Shoes handles your crit avoid. You do not want crit avoid. I forgot about that. And for the belt, mana regen, minion health, elemental damage over time, health. Like I said, as long as you stay around 400% minion health, you can put minion damage over time. You can put elemental damage over time everywhere else. Then for the gloves, atrophies with damage over time. I think I would rather have one with hybrid health or like cast speed instead. This is just what I had on hand. Then Fiery Dragon Shoes with HP. I was trying to get one with movement speed, but HP is great too. I can't complain. Then, of course, Soulfire here. I changed my old Soulfire. I had an older Soulfire, but this is better for this build specifically because I wanted the Void Res. The LE damage over time is tier 6, which is great. The Void Res, like, really good. This is like one of the main reasons to play this build. Otherwise, your Ignites would probably not do enough damage. And that's pretty much it for the gearing itself. Nothing, like, there's no uniques you technically want to run, I don't think, other than Calamity on the helm. Like a Calamity would be great with like 2 to 3 LP here. But I bricked my last Calamity, I think. Yeah, I bricked this Calamity. Didn't get plus a Hungering Souls on it, so it's better just to have plus a Hungering Souls. Then you can swap over to Calamity when you get like a really good one. Also, make sure that the increased fire damage roll on it is good. I have another Calamity in my stash that is like 2 LP, I think, but it has like 25% increased fire damage. That is really not worth it. You don't want to be wasting your plus a Hungering Soul stuff on that. So you want to make sure that the roll on it is high and the LP on it is high. Now, the thing is, these aren't actually that rare. If you went to Rye and just kept farming them, you'll eventually get one. It's not actually not that hard. I just bricked mine, so it happens. And that's pretty much it for like legendaries I would run. Now for idols, mainly resistances. Just use idols for resistances, really, to be honest, so that you can afford better pieces of gear. As you can tell here, just care about the resistances. But if you really want to know what damage idols, mainly you want these kind of idols that give you increased damage while transform, increased spell damage. This is great for your Infernal Shade while clearing, which is the most important part. Same thing with these 3x1s, the increased damage, spell damage. This will apply to the Infernal Shade, which is the most important part. You really don't care about the like Hungering Souls damage because it just does so much damage anyways. You really care about boosting that Infernal Shade damage and making it so you can clear packs. And then the best in slot is Throne of Ambition. I do not have it here. I don't know if I have it in my stash. I do not. Throne of Ambition, I'm sure you already know what that is, but pretty much it'll give us a bunch of armor on single target. Let us scale this armor that I have to make it so that we're actually tanky on a single target, which is really important. Also gives us 400% increased fire damage, which obviously is the best thing ever. So Throne of Ambition, best in slot, one of the main reasons to play an Ignite build. With all that being said, this has been Dread from Epoch Builds. Have a wonderful rest of the day wherever you're at, and bye.